Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Wednesday, May the 22nd, 2024. Yesterday I was talking about what happened on Pentecost, that sound, that rush of a mighty wind, and how it literally kind of chased the disciples out from that point on. Because when you think about it, up until this point, they had more or less been just hanging out there in Jerusalem. But now this power of the Holy Spirit, the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, compelled them to go out into the world, that scattered them, if you will, to share the good news. Now, the really cool thing here is that in the Bible, the word for spirit comes from a root word, which means to breathe or to blow like the wind. The fundamental idea of spirit, therefore, in both Hebrew and Greek, is breath, air, wind, even storm. It just depends on the context. It may be a gentle breeze, as in Genesis 2:7, where God breathed into Adam's nostrils the breath of life and he became a human being, or a light cooling wind, as in Genesis 3:8, when God is walking through the Garden of Eden at the time of the evening breeze, or it even could be gale force winds like we've heard here in the Pentecost story, or also in Exodus 15:8, where God caused the waters of the Red Sea to part. Furthermore, the word inspiration, which of course is what happened to those disciples, soon to be known as apostles, is then itself derived from that word spirit, again meaning to breathe or to blow. And it means to influence or stimulate or guide, otherwise cause or motivate someone to do something. In this case, the Holy Spirit caused or motivated those apostles. The Holy Spirit breathed or blew into their lives like the rush of a mighty wind, inspired them to go out into the world to share the good news of Jesus Christ. It's a funny thing, though. You really can't see the wind, can you? Oh, you can certainly feel it, of course. Sometimes if it's strong and powerful enough, as on that first Pentecost or during my family's visit to Mount Rushmore years ago, you can also hear it as well, but you can't really see it. Perhaps you remember that Jesus once said, when a Pharisee named Nicodemus came to visit him one night, "The wind blows where it chooses, and you hear the sound of it, but you don't know where it comes from or where it goes." So it is with the Holy Spirit, said Jesus, and everyone who is born of the Spirit. Although I'm not so sure about not being able to tell where the wind comes from or where it goes. Growing up here in Freehold, I could often tell if the wind had shifted directions, especially when signaling an approaching rainstorm, by its, of all things, smell. All because of the Nescafe plant just outside of town. I don't know if it's still true. I don't smell too well these days for whatever reason. But back in the day, when the wind shifted a certain way, invariably signaling again an approaching rainstorm, you could actually smell coffee. In fact, to this day, whenever I smell coffee when I'm outdoors, I automatically look up into the sky for rain clouds. It's like an automatic reflex or something. But even so, the wind still pretty much goes where it pleases, though, doesn't it? And that's certainly true of the Holy Spirit as well. God's Spirit comes and goes where it pleases, touches people however it chooses. It's not always the overpowering rush of a violent wind either, the way it scattered those first disciples to the four corners of the earth with the gospel. Sometimes the Spirit's more like a gentle breeze, as I mentioned a little bit ago, that pulls and nudges you into action as opposed to somehow forcing you into it. In fact, I have my own story of the Holy Spirit's influence and inspiration. I've told it before, but back in 1969, the evangelist Billy Graham brought one of his famous crusades to New York City and Madison Square Garden. And here at Hope, we rented a bus, 50 or so people, including me, 13 years old at the time. We rode up together to attend it. Now, if you ever experienced one of those crusades or have seen one on television, they were filled with inspiring, in the truest sense of the word, truly inspiring music and personal testimonies, and then, of course, a powerful sermon from the late, great Billy Graham himself. And this one, back in 1969, was no exception. And then at the close of the evening's program, there was an altar call, in this case, an invitation to come down to the floor of the arena to meet with a volunteer counselor to make a personal decision for Christ. Again, I was 13 years old at the time, been raised in the Lutheran Church. In fact, I'd be confirmed here at Hope the following spring, so I already was a Christian, baptized in May of 1956 when I was barely a month old. Moreover, at that point in my life, I was painfully shy. So I was the last person out of those 50-some-odd people you would have thought to go down for that altar call, but I did. And to this day, I can't adequately explain what happened or why. All I recall is a gentle tugging at my heart, leading me down to the floor of that arena, a comforting, inviting, persuasive, reassuring presence that I can only describe as the power of the Holy Spirit. My godmother, my mom's sister, who was also in attendance that night, always insisted thereafter that it was this precise moment that I first received a call to ministry. I'm not so sure about that, but it certainly started me down a path that eventually did lead me to seminary and ordination. Other people from our group were not quite so happy with my decision, though, that day, and the 45-minute delay that I caused for our return trip to Freehold, but that's a whole other story. Suffice it to say, that moment was for me a firsthand experience of the power of the Holy Spirit in a Christian's life. Again, of all people, I was the last person you would have expected to do what I did that night, just as I was the last person who knew me back then who would have ever expected me to go on and to become a pastor myself. I've told the story as well that when in catechism class I was stubbornly would never answer Al Gibson, and he'd stubbornly wait for me to answer, and finally his daughter had to intervene and answer it to break the impasse between her father and me. And I thought that I was kind of fooling Pastor Gibson, but looking back on it now, I got a lot more out of all of that than I was willing to admit at the time. And I think the Holy Spirit will always have the last laugh in each of our lives as well. Whether it's through the rush of a violent wind or a gentle, inviting breeze, the Holy Spirit will eventually breathe new life into us. Don't know when, don't know how, but the Holy Spirit will touch and captivate each of our lives before all is said and done. Just wait and see. Now, I certainly don't have all the answers to life's most difficult questions. I don't know how all the nonsense and sadness of our crazy, mixed-up world is ever going to be resolved, but this much I do know. Just as Bob Dylan sang years ago, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is indeed blowing in the wind. The answer is the Holy Spirit blowing into our lives in so many different ways, but always with the same effect, changing our lives for the better, most of all giving us the breath of new life in Jesus Christ. Well, hope you have a great day. We'll continue our conversation again tomorrow. Until then, take care. Bye.